We got here, we didn't have nothing. Every time we gained something, there's been a reaction to it.
Where do you go when you lose your land? This is something you put everything you had, and in spite of everything you did, it's gone.
This is my camera right here. So if
You
I
can
have
talk.
to
You can just talk to me.
okay, but if I have to, okay.
Extenuate
If
a
I have
point.
to-
That's your tight shot.
If I have to go to the audience and break the fourth wall.
Yeah, there you go.
So we're doing.
So I mean, to start, I want to just dive in on your story. Like, what brought you to where you are?
What's your story?
What's my story?
What brought you? Besides being a glutton for punishment and like, you know, you want to go this road and tell stories and come up with ideas that you then have to convince other people to fund,
Yeah.
you know? I couldn't convince my parents to give me like all the Christmas gifts that I wanted, and they actually love me.
Well, so what was the foundation of your storytelling? Like, when did you go, oh, I want to do this?
Man, that's a very interesting question because it was one of those things that, in retrospect, you were like, oh, you were always in this mind space, you just didn't know. And this is for, you think about the time frame when I came up. I was a teenager in the 80s, and there weren't many Black directors. And so you didn't like think of like this is a career. And when I was younger, it was doctor, lawyer, banker, and in my case, engineer. That was the thing, the hot thing, And I started off at Purdue as an engineer major, and summarily flunked out. But stubborn as you have to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I went back to Purdue, but when I went back, I started acting. And then during the course of being directed by someone else, I started giving suggestions about how I thought the scene should go, what we should be doing in the scene. And my director, who then became my mentor and big support for me, she said, Mr. Polk, those are great ideas. And when you get your own production, you can do whatever you want. But today, you will shut up and you will do what I told you to do. And I said, okay. Because, she was intimidating.
Yeah.
She was from Brooklyn. It was my first introduction to Brooklyn, for real. And then, I got a letter at the end of the semester saying, hey, look, good try. It's a good try, but you can't come back. And so I was thinking, like, what am I going to do? Because then it was like, if you don't go to college, you're going to be homeless. Like, it was like no in between. If you don't go to college, you forget it, your life is over. And so I thought back to this one woman who was a guidance counselor there. And she was, supposed to check on me and make sure I was doing during the semester. And she said, I don't think engineering is what you want to do. I'm like, what are you talking about? I definitely want to do this. And she said, no, I don't think it is. But, okay, just humor me. Take this book home as a course book for communications. Circle everything that interests you. I'm not even putting it together. I go through the book and I circle everything and I bring it back to her and she says, this is what you want to do. Everything I circled was music, film, and television. And I never thought about that as an option. So now I'm like, wait a minute. I was in the AV class in high school. This music group called DeBarge, I came up with music video ideas for each song. And I was like, yeah, I would do this, and I would do that, and I would do this. And I never thought that that was me sort of saying, you want to go into the world of filmmaking. I was an avid TV and film watcher when I was a kid, glued to the TV. Alfred Hitchcock and Rod Serling are my two of my most very important influences creatively. So I started putting it all together and I called my mentor, my director, and told her, hey, I think I want to direct. And she said, she didn't even blink. She didn't even hesitate. She said, come to my house And when I got to her house, she gave me a book of screenplays by Black directors from the 70s and gave me a Super 8 camera and said, go do it. And that's how I started.
Do you remember your first project? Like, what was the first thing you dove into?
My first project was the film I had to do to get into NYU. And basically, I did a music video of my favorite group was the Tribe Called Quest, Benito Applebaum. And what I did was to get the I guess the administration, the people who were looking at my sort of submission to know who I was. I got my friends to act like music video host, and they were interviewing me as the director, and we were debuting my music video on their show, and I submitted it, and I was only one of 14 students that they admitted for mid-semester. They weren't keen on, letting people transfer into the school. So it was one of 14 that got into film school in the middle of the year at NYU.
And so you step into film school. What did that education give you?
A hard time and a long way to go. Well, I started now I'm definitely going to age myself here. I started off on a Steenbeck film.
Yep.
We had to cut the audio, tape, and we had to cut the film and put all that together. So you got to understand the actual bones of making film, like literally making the film and putting all the stuff together. But I think what I got really from there was the appreciation for what went into filmmaking. When we had to study other filmmakers and then break down, like, why did they, frame it this way? Why did they choose to make this movement? And you get all that theory. I think that's the biggest thing that I got from there. And you're in a room full of some of the best, filmmakers, best students. The unfortunate thing is that film school is like a weed out. It's just like engineering. All the kids that I went into engineering, I was one of the weed outs. It'll weed you out because it's tough. And it was really hard then because we were actually doing film. We had 400-foot loads. And you had to get money back in the 80s, like the 90s. That was hard to do. But I think for me, it was really the theory of film and why it wasn't just putting a camera in front of someone and doing something. Unless you were doing it on purpose for a reason. Believe me, I watched one of the films that was an 18-minute zoom in on a singular person. That was the whole film. But, that taught you there are no limits to what you can do as an artist and a filmmaker. It's just about what are you trying to convey? What are you trying to get the audience to, to connect with?
So you go to film school.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you start working with brands?
Well, that's a big jump. There's a big jump there because when I got out of film school, I went to NFL Films and I started working there. Arguably, I wasn't working with, I was working for one of the biggest brands. And they definitely had they had an ethos, they had a way of doing the storytelling. And from there is where I really, really cut my teeth. That's where I really started to learn how to put stories together, how to take nuggets of things and craft it. Because believe me, my Cowboys, I'm a big Cowboys fan, they were 5-11 every year that I had to cut their highlights. How do you make 5-11 seem hopeful and exciting?
Yeah.
But, that's what we're tasked to do. And so taking things that we didn't shoot and knowing like a little bit, we knew the players and we knew the score, but did we know the story of the game? And then the story of the game could be different than the footage that was actually shot. So, you kind of learn there, and that was where I think the biggest thing in terms of like where I cut my teeth. And then getting to work with brands, there's an unofficial and then there's an official date. The unofficial date is when I want to say in 2008, I was dead set. I wanted to be one of the directors for the BMW film series, and I felt maybe if I can make one of these spec commercial spots, that let me get my chance. Wishful thinking back then. And so I did a spec spot for boiling soda, and it was just a version of me and my obsession with boiling soda. And I was sitting around talking to someone, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to think of a spec spot to do. Someone said, why don't you do a spot on that soda you're always drinking? Like, you're like obsessed with that. And I'm like, oh, you're right. And so I did this piece, out of pocket, got some people, and did this, and put it out there on YouTube and sent it to the owner of Boiling. And he said, this is the best iteration of what anyone has tried to do for this brand. And then when it was on YouTube, one of the children of the owner found it like randomly and said, this is amazing, this is hilarious, I gotta send this to my father. And I'm like, well, let me tell you, your father already knows about this. But that was sort of like the unofficial thing that I, worked with, the brand. And then later, I was not actively working. Let's just say I was taking a hiatus. And a friend of mine called me up. She's a really well-established producer. And she says, hey, I have a spot for you to direct. And it was a Home Depot spot. And now at this point, I have years of wanting to do a spot now, and now I'm getting my chance. So I'm pulling out all the tricks, and the spot turned out really well. Now, suffice it to say, there was a lot on the cutting room floor because I'm trying to put all of the stuff in there. But it turned out really well, and the brand, it was a branded content spot for a tent pole, and it turned out so well that the brand was like, we should talk about making this a linear spot. And that was sort of like the first, idea that I knew, I can do this, like for real. So.
Jumping back a little bit, what was it about the BMW films that you went like, ooh, I want to do this?
You know what? It was the combination of what I wanted to do. They were like little movies, but they were also clearly promoting this brand. And I said, that's the type of thing I want to do. I don't want to do the pitch stuff where you come out with a box of Tide and you say, well, Tide gets out all the sayings and, just one cup instead of two. And I didn't want to do that. And this was sort of like the nexus of like really being a filmmaker, telling a story, but also communicating the idea of, in this case, this brand that'll help you get out of these serious situations, and this sleek and all these features that it has, and being able to highlight it in a way that wasn't obvious, like every other car commercial that was like 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds and all that stuff. And it was they were just well done, And if you didn't say this was BMW films, you were like, these are just amazing short stories. So I thought that was sort of the highlight. I still think that is some of the best brand sponsored, filmmaking done outside of the heralded, in my heart, my storybook series by Marriott, Bonvoy. And they were, and the gap between them is quite some time. I want to say it's about 12 years. But when I stumbled across that, I was just moved by the type of filmmaking, the style. And BMW is very aggressive because, it's like basically James Bond in a BMW. Mm-hmm. But the Bonvoy stories were nuanced, and they were they were intentional in the way that we want you to feel this. It's not, we don't want you to just move past this shot to get to the next one. We want you to live in this space for a little bit. And it aligned with the way I wanted to tell stories and the way I wanted to communicate visually. And they were like poetic as well, like the cinematic poetry, as I would call it.
When you're looking at those types of content, how did that influence how you wanted to tell stories, and what were you pulling from that that you started to use in your work?
Well, what's interesting is that if anybody's really a fan of Storybook and they see my work, they're like, let's see what he got. We'll see that. You know, it was the deliberateness of the camera, right? There were moments where there were like these slow zooms, like the subject very far away in a field, camera way back, and then these slow zooms that made you focus not only on the subject, but also gave you time to take in the space that they were in. And it gave you a moment to try to understand, what must they be thinking in this space? I'm getting to witness them in it. And it was the lighting, the composition. It was just beautiful in the way that I watched one and I cried after. And I said, this is why I want to be a director, because I want to move someone the way I'm moved right now watching this. And that, to me, that's the power of it. And if you can take that and, in this case, sell something, you just kind of remove the selling part of it and you just say, just rock with me. It's like you found a friend, right? And it's like if you're sitting at a lunchroom table and you don't know a guy and they pull out the Amazing Spider-Man and you're a big comic nerd, and all of a sudden now you have a friend because you have that same Spider-Man and then you have the other ones. You feel like you found a friend. And so with that series, I felt like I found people that talk and think and appreciate this medium the way I do, and want to tell stories the way. And that way you don't feel alone. And it also validates. It validates what you're thinking, because it isn't the normal stuff. It isn't what's every day.
And so, as a director, when did you start stepping into longer form storytelling?
Well, I did get that chance at NFL Films, but that was kind of relegated to the world of football and some of the stories that are sort of tangential to that. So it's really, really kind of limited in a sense.
Right.
There are a lot of different roads you can go down, but it is kind of like you're still playing in the same town. And it was with the Gaining Ground, the Fight for Black Land, the film with John Deere and Al Roker, that I really got to put all of those things that I had learned as an independent filmmaker, as a producer at NFL Films, as a student of the BMW series, as I can call it a worshiper of the Storybook series. This is where I was able to put, and all the other filmmakers that I started admiring their work, that you see on, different sites. And you're like, oh man, that's amazing. I love that technique. I love what they did. This was an opportunity with this film for me to kind of pull out all of it and just put all of it into that. Because I think there's still this feeling, and I don't know if you feel this way, that will I get another chance to do this?
I mean, I think that's every creative, right? I think that's the balance of, not only this style of work, but filmmaking in general is like, you work on this project, will there be a next one?
Right.
Will there be a next one? Because I think each time you're proving yourself as a creative that you're growing and you're finding things and you're improving and you're bringing the craft forward at the same time. And, I think especially because there are so many amazing directors and filmmakers that it's a big world.
Yeah, what can I bring to that conversation, right? But the interesting thing about this, and I say to people, being a director is one of the few occupations that you can do very few times and still say, that's what you do. Like if I did one surgery, I mean, I'm a doctor, but someone would be like, you only did one surgery. But you know, someone could put out one really good film, they're a director for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And but it's always, I think, for me, I'm always learning, and I'm always like looking at what I can, you know, teach myself and what I can pick up in it, because there's so many different things, and you know, not only just techniques, but we're talking about technology changing and all the different things that go into. Now you have a GoPro and you can put a camera in places you did before, and then you have 8K on a cell phone, and now you can put a camera and do things with it you couldn't before, and you're like, hey, I want to play in that sandbox a little bit. So between the technology and just still wanting to, you know, be better and bring something different that I didn't do the last time, it's always that process. But in the back of my mind, I'm always feeling like I gotta put everything in this one because this may be it, you know?
I'd love to dive into Gaining Ground and start at the beginning, because I think, you know, a lot of the filmmakers and a lot of the brands in this space look at a film like that and go like, "Ooh, we want to do that too, but we don't know where to start." So let's start at the beginning. How did that project come about?
You know, it's as my life has wanted to be. It's never just like direct thing in the way it's always happened. It was very, it was almost happened in reversed in the way it usually happens. And I think because of that, we talk about authenticity a lot, and we talk about this sort of like the realness of what we're doing and not, you know, kind of selling, right? And because this process was a little different, I think everywhere in the process, with the brand and with Our Roker Entertainment and with myself and with the story, there was a genuineness, there was an authenticity all across the board, just in how we were communicating, how we were engaging, and even how it came to be. So to answer that question, Denise Herscreen was a former colleague from NFL Films, and she's working with Our Roker Entertainment now. And she sees an article about this program that John Deere is doing called LEAP. And the program is there to help landowners, particularly black farmers and landowners, get clear title to their land. This resonated with her because her grandfather was a sharecropper. And she spent a lot of time on that land with him, thinking it was his land. And then later finding out, no, it wasn't. And so, you know, she has a very personal, genuine connection to this, and it moves her and compels her to reach out to John Deere. John Deere wasn't even thinking about doing a documentary or anything. They were kind of like, wow, that wasn't on our radar. So again, this is an authentic and organic conversation. It just sort of happens. And then once they, you know, realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a there of theirs, you know, and they pitched a couple ideas. And at this point, I'm not a part of the process. And they landed on the documentary, an hour-long documentary. And the thinking was, we have stories, we have people, we have a process, there's a lot to tell. We need to do it justice, not only for ourselves, but for the people that we ask to be in this, the people that we ask to tell their stories, that we ask, can we come into your family reunions? Can we come into your home? And can you share your stories with us? It's kind of like we have to do right by them and not just make this some one-off thing that just sort of like comes and goes. And so I heard about the project, and there was another director being considered. And I said, every time I spoke to Denise, I said, hey, did you get the director for that project? You know, how's it going? No, we're still working on it. I said, man, you know, that's an amazing project. I would love to direct that. And I said that every time. And it became a joke at some point, because I'm like, hey, how's it going? And so I get a call one day, literally get a call out of my sleep. and it's Denise. She's like, what are you doing? I am asleep, Denise. What do you want? She says, wake up. I have work for you. And I'm like, hey, work. You know what else? She's like, work. You got my attention. You want to do that project about the black farmers? I'm like, you mean the one that every time I've spoken to you over the last 5 months that I said I would love to direct? She says, yeah. And I'm like, of course I do. And that's how I came to be a part of it. You know?
When you look at the project and the starting point of that, as a director, how do you start the story finding process?
Well, because I was working with a brand, I had my own personal questions like, are they doing this because they have an issue? And this is their way of kind of diffusing that. Or they're trying to do goodwill to offset some bad things. And so I started doing a little research in that direction to see what were the scandals, the issues that they were facing as a brand with the public. And there was one particular thing that stood out, and it was a thing that was just with them and farmers and their equipment and basically the right to repair. And I said, okay, that's not the worst thing. I see, I understand all of that, the dynamics there. There isn't something crazy going on, and this is just a cover up basically. And so I just wanted to, make sure that I wasn't stepping into that conversation unknowingly. And then at least giving myself the option to say, I don't want to be a part of that. Like if this was something where you had been involved with desecrating indigenous, burial grounds, no, I'm not going to be a part of, covering that up. And, but I also asked the question, why? Why are you doing this? And because I was very upfront, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be a pawn. I don't want to be a part of that. Why are you doing this? And they said, these are our people. These are the people that use our equipment. These are the people that we talk to, that we have connection with. And it's decades. We're embedded in this community in this particular way. And essentially we're saying, this is us being good community citizens. This is just, we're helping out people that are in our community and that buy our equipment and are dealing with these issues. And so I said, okay, that makes sense to me. And I like that answer. And so that's where it started. But then it was a process of discovery because I never heard of heirs property. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know what was going on. And so then it was the deep dive into the issue. And then it was starting to meet and go out, with initially with Zoom meetings, and then actually driving to these areas, driving from Charlotte, where I am, to Florida, driving to Georgia, driving to Alabama, to go talk to the landowners and see them in their space, not just kind of hear about it, but see them in their space and actually feel what those spaces were like for them. And because when you're walking around like, and that's where that happened, and that's where that happened, and you start to see the tapestry of their life start to come together, and then you start to fill out, oh, these are where the stories are, and so that, and then I had a really great assistant / researcher / AD / producer, Shameen Williams, who really, something would pop up in my head, and I'm like, okay, we need a historian. Okay, we need somebody to speak from the religious, angle, because this has gone on, and we know how the church is really, embedded in our community and these kind of conversations. And so she would go out and find these people and then come back and give me a list. And I'm like, and then she would set up these meetings, and then we would just talk. And for 5 months, that's what we were doing. We were just meeting and talking and having conversation with all of the different people that could possibly tell their part of the story. And that's what we did.
How did you start to settle is probably not the right word. How did you decide to choose some of the characters that were going to sort of lead this narrative? Because you have everything from multi-generational farmers to people who are intimately connected with the civil rights movement in the 60s. And you have this really amazing balance of, generations of farmers and families.
Um, well, John Deere helped us identify some some of the farmers and some of the families because they had been working with them with the LEAP process, with helping them already to clear their title, whether it was connecting them with organizations or helping them navigate the titles and stuff like that. They were already doing that work, so they knew some of the people that they had been helping, and so then it was on me to then interview these people and then see, because you have a great story, but this person isn't a great communicator, and they don't give you like what you need to really get that story across. And there were some people that did not make the cut because we knew they were uncomfortable, and it was in the work to make them comfortable was not going to happen in the time frame. We had people who had to fall out because of personal reasons, and really people we really wanted to speak to. And so it was definitely, we were dealing with the same kind of challenges, like, are you available? Do you have the energy? And it just so happened, and I did this, I looked up everyone that was in the film one day, and I realized that most of the people that are in the film have had a TED Talk, or they have there are a couple people who have a MacArthur Genius Award. And I'm like, wow, we really have some really heavy people in here. But I didn't know that before. I had just sort of like, oh, they're really good, they're doing really good work, and they can provide us their part of the story that we need to tell this. And that goal was to tell as full a story as possible. And again, going back to the whole idea that, will I ever do this again? It was like, well, this is my shot. I got to put everything in it. And for the sake of this story, I have to tell as complete a story as possible, because will someone else pick this up and tell the parts that I didn't tell? Will they go down the roads that I didn't go down? And I didn't want to leave that up to chance, that this was the only time and then we just didn't tell a full story and then everyone walked out. We're like, yeah, that was cool, but we got 20 other questions now. I wanted to make sure that as many questions were answered with this film, from the issue to how we got here to who's in this world to help, and why these things have happened historically and politically, so that you can have the discussion afterwards.
As you were settling into the story, what were the characteristics of people that you looked for as a storyteller? Like, what makes a compelling character to you?
You know what? Passion. Everybody that we landed on was passionate about it, and to the point that when you got off the phone with them, whatever they were doing, you wanted to do. That's when you know, like, the people like are really about this. So when I talked to Thomas, I'm like, yo, I want to go to law school. Or I talked to Karen Washington, or I want to start an urban garden. Like, everyone I talked to, I got off the phone with, and we're like, yeah, they're, that's them. And to your point, there were people that you talk to and you're like, yeah, okay. They don't really pop. And, that energy and that passion and that fire in this is particularly when you're talking about a legal thing and farming, not the most exciting stuff, but when that passion comes through, you're like, wow, these people are passionate about it. And someone like PJ Haney. PJ Haney is just a star to me. He's a dude, like, in the sense that he just pops, and he's always that energy of teaching and concern and care and admiration for the work that he does. For it's and you know it. Like when you're just sitting there talking, you know that this is the person that you want in the film.
We always say, like, you know a strong character when you hang up the phone and you immediately want to call someone and tell them about the person you just talked to.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like that. Like you walk away like, hey man, I'm gonna be a farmer. So that's really how I felt. Everyone I spoke to left such an impression on me that there was this thing in my mind like, hey, I want to do that.
When you look at the story you were able to tell and your relationship with John Deere and Al Roker Entertainment, like how, if you do this again, what are you going to take from that experience?
Let's say when.
When you do it again, what do you want to take from that experience and what do you learn in that process as a director to both tell a story the way you want to tell it and uphold the mission that the brand gives you?
Okay. I think one thing for people who work with brands to consider is you have to listen to what's not being said. You have to get really good and adept at hearing the conversation that's going on that no one is actually mouthing. And I early on knew the expectation of John Deere. They never said, oh, we want this to be this amazing film and it goes in all these festivals and all this other stuff. But listening to the people that were on the first call, I knew what it meant for them to, one, because someone has to okay it. Someone has to go out on a limb and say, we're going to put this money to this. And in their case, they haven't done this before. It's not like they have like 20 or 30 films. This is one of two that they have. And so I was very intently listening and hearing like, okay, I'm getting the signal. And so that's just coming into the conversation. I knew that. Now, the hard part of answering this question is I was spoiled by John Deere and Al Roker Entertainment because they literally said, go get the story. They didn't, the caveat from John Deere is we don't want to see John Deere all over this film. Do not come back here with somebody in a John Deere hat and a John Deere sweatshirt and a John Deere tractor, drinking out of a John Deere mug, we don't want to see that. We want it to be about the people. And so that's when I think what I will take is I have to make sure my expectations are not being, sort of aligned with my experience here, because each of these experiences are different. Each of the brands are looking for something different. They have, different goals. And I think, if I can refer back to the branded content things I've done, I've done a lot of those. And these were things that clearly we want the brand positioned a certain way. We have our logo. We have to use the shards this way. It has to come in from this part. So it's really communicating and just understanding what do you want? What do you want to accomplish? And I always ask that up front. What do you want this to say and do? How do you want people to feel when they actually see this? And I kind of take all of that stuff and take this experience, which was very freeing and liberating, and say, hey guys, when I talk to the next person, the next brand, I say, guys, this is what I can tell you. If you look at this film and you like it, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you how we were able to accomplish that. And I think that's part of the communication. And also the knowing that we were all kind of new in this. We were this conversation, like you're working with a brand that hadn't done anything this big at all. And like, oh wow, you have to remember who you're dealing with and where they're at in this kind of conversation. You may be an expert, but they may not. So you have to, like, hey, you make sure you over communicate sometimes and make sure that there's the temperature check. Are you okay? Is this cool? But I think what I've learned more is about what happens when you get done and the work you have to put into the distribution conversation and where is this going to live and how are you going to get to those places where people can see it to even make those decisions on the distribution. A lot of what I'm taking from this experience is what do you do after? And honestly, that conversation should be happening way sooner than after the film is finished.
As a director, when you're approached by a brand like John Deere to make a film like this, obviously you put a ton of weight in the story, but what weight do you put in your relationship with the brand and how do you navigate that?
Again, I was spoiled. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I've done a lot of work with brands, and there's, you have the brand, you have the brand's agency, then you have the network's internal agency, and you're on these calls. You have to not leave things up to assumption. The gap of assumption could be the abyss that you and the project falls into. And so I'm very cognizant of that, but I'm also very protective of the brand and like really trying to make sure I'm not putting them in bad situations and understanding what they want to do and what they want to accomplish and how this particular thing without context, without a drawn out explanation can just veer things off. The one thing about NFL films, that the reason that they get the stories and the access to the players is they protect the players. They allow the players' personality to come out, but they don't put the players in compromising positions with their access so that the players like, what happened? Like, I let you into my home, I'm saying all this stuff and I thought you were gonna, that's never really happened with NFL films. And that's why they get the access they get. So coming from that, in this case, the brand is the player to me. And I want to make sure that they're in the best light because you don't want what you do to distract from the story and from the goal and the objective. And we were all kind of had that goal and objective. They want to help these farmers, these landowners with the program. I want to help with this film to get it out. So in that case, I look at it, we're a team and we have a goal. And the one thing that I would say is to make sure that the brand, the agency, production, the director, you all understand that you're on the team and you all understand what does the touchdown look like. Because it can look different for different people. The touchdown can look different for different people. And so, and I've seen it happen. What you thought was great, what you thought was amazing, and the brand is sitting there like, no, we need you to change this, and that. And you're like, but, and there's also that fine line of, in protecting, is not letting them go down roads that will derail what their objective is. And that's where I'm going to tell you, it's a challenging thing because you don't want to come off as, I'm the expert, I know what I'm doing, I'm the director, you just have to trust me. But really you're saying like, I've done this and I've been down this road and so now, I'll give you a funny experience I had. There was a project that a friend gave to me, and this guy, was a singer. It was like a music video, and the guy had all these ideas he wanted to do, and I'm like, you don't have the budget for this, and so I kept trying to manage his expectations, because I didn't want him to get to that point where we took the money, we did it, and then we finished, and he's like, wait a minute, but where's all this? And then I'm telling him after the fact, well, we couldn't afford this, we had to do this. And in retrospect, maybe I should have done that, I don't know. But I told him no. I said, listen, man, like, we can do a version of that, but we can't do it like that. And I was very, very clear. But all he heard was no. And I talked to my friend who was the director at the time. She's well established, she's doing her thing. And she told me a story of another director who was bigger than her that she worked with. And we all know his name, I won't say it, but he had clients that would say, make suggestions, and he'd say, that's a great idea. We're gonna try that. Sometimes when you're trying to protect people, all they hear is no. And you have to find the language that allows you to say what you're saying, but they hear yes. And, sometimes you just have to hey, this is not the battle to fight now. And we're gonna do this, and then let them see. And then sometimes they're like, oh, yeah, we don't need that. And so, but it is a balance with making what you, not coming off as a know-it-all, but also saying, I'm really trying to protect you in here because I know.
Gaining Ground in itself was really successful, right? The film, I don't even know how many film festivals you've been, but you've been in all the film festivals. And for a brand, that would be a big win, right? Like, we made this film, people have seen it, people have consumed it. When you share the story of the process and when you look at the collaboration between you and John Deere, what do you hope other brands take away from how you approach this process in terms of how they move their storytelling forward?
Oh man, selfishly, I want. Okay, this is layers to what you're saying here. So I want to hit a couple of them. One, a lot of brands look at this as, what's the metric? What's the validation for the expense? My personal philosophy is, do you want to do good or do you want to do something? Because you can't necessarily quantify good, right? But in this particular case, if you change the trajectory of one family who maintains their land, and because they maintain their land, they're able to put their children through college, or they're able to give their children land that they can farm and they can go into a field that they find fulfilling and enriching for their lives, and then generations from now, these people can come back to their land. Did that substantiate your expense on this film? Luckily, with John Deere, they had already been doing work to help people, and it wasn't sort of a reverse thing where hey, we got this idea. Someone said, hey, we got this idea for black farmers, and then they said, hey, let's create a program. They were already doing that work quietly, and I think that was a beautiful scenario. But I really hope that brands see, one, you don't have to be the center of attention. You're big enough, okay? Most of these brands are multi-million-dollar companies. They're global. People know who they are. You're going to get it. You're going to get your just due. You just have to be patient. It's really kind of like if I get here and said, I did an amazing film. I'm a great director. It lands different than you saying you did an amazing film. Letting the public, figure out, oh, wow, you're behind this? But it also means that investment isn't a one-time thing. Are you doing activations? Are you creating curriculums? Are you creating all these little kind of satellites or spokes coming from the hub of your project so that other people are aware of it, and then they can say, oh, wow, this isn't just a one-off. This is a sustainable conversation. But I really hope that, and I'm, of course, this has come out, and I've talked to different brands, and I talked to people at the brand. They're like, we're trying to convince our brand to do what John Deere did, which is get out of the way and let the story. And I hope that what they see as a good story will get somebody every time. And when you tell good stories, they will remember you. And I told somebody in the brand this. I said, if you feel this way, if you're just feeling real spicy one day, and you're talking to the finance person, whoever's the money guy, and they're like, why should we spend money on this? I said, I want you to ask them, what was their favorite book when they were a kid? What was their favorite comic when they were a kid? What was their favorite movie when they were a kid? And when they start telling you about it, and you just let them talk, and you ask them more about it, and then you say, how did it impact you? And then they start telling you about how it impacted them, and you say, that's why you should put the money behind it. Because the stories that you consume in your life impacted you in such a way that you're telling a compelling, story right now about it, and it's moving you and it's moving us. That's why you should do it, because you have the opportunity to do something that in the way that impacted you, you can do that for other people.
I love it. Okay, before I let you go, I have my 5 not so rapid fire questions.
Gotcha.
Which parlays perfectly into what you just said. The first question is, what is a story that had a big impact on your life and why?
Oh, that's easy. It's the Twilight Zone called The Big Wish. And it is the only Twilight Zone that is a majority Black cast. And it's about a little boy who he admires this boxer named Boley. Boley is one of the boxers that people use to, pad their record. But the kid says, you're going to win tonight, Boley. And, Boley's like, yeah, kid, And the kid is like, Boley win, he's going to win. And he's wishing so hard that Boley wins. But Boley doesn't believe he won. And his disbelief undoes the wish that this little boy had. And it moved me, one, because, I love Rod Serling. I love the Twilight Zone. I am a nut for the Twilight Zone. It is one of the most impactful pieces of media content that I've consumed. But the idea that you can wish something into existence and that disbelief can undo, that was one of the most powerful stories. And I used it in my own life with people who come to me and they say they really want something. And I say, is this the big wish? If it's the big wish, then I will do it for you. But it has to be the big wish. And you have to believe it. And you have to watch this episode so you don't undo it when I do it. So the big wish is Twilight Zone.
I love it. What is one film you think everyone should see?
God. One film everyone should see. Oh, wow. One film everyone should see. One film everyone should see. Man, that is hard for me to. I would say everyone should see The Twilight Zone. But let's see. One film everyone should see. I'm trying to think. Oh, God, man, that's hard. See, there's the film student side of me that
Right.
wants to say something
Yeah.
like
Something profound.
like Last Year of Marion
Yeah.
Vaught or Susan Kane or some crazy stuff like that. But oh man, I want to say something, and it's so silly, but it's a movie that no matter where it comes on, and if it comes on, I sit down and watch it. It's Coming to America.
I love it.
And it's because it's such a American, even though it's a majority black cast is such an American cultural conversation, and it had such an impact on culture, the way the jokes, the characters, who Eddie Murphy is, and comedy itself, I think, is one of those things that, just resonates with people way beyond. Now, if I'm just getting in my bag about a film that I just absolutely love and I just want people to watch because it's such brilliant filmmaking, it is The Thin Red Line. And that is my man, who is the director? It is he's the guy that all of these guys like Inarutu and all these guys sort of, I think, Terrence Malick, Thin Red Line, beautiful film.
Yeah.
And the acting, that is one of my favorite films, The Thin Red Line.
I love it.
It should have won Oscar over Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan.
Ooh.
It should have.
What is something you never leave home without?
What's that?
What is something you never leave home without?
Street sense.
Nice.
Seriously, street sense.
What's an important place for you to find inspiration?
Oh, an important place for me to find inspiration. I'm gonna give you an A and B answer. The A answer is my children. Because I try to look through their eyes, but I also try to look at the world that they're in, how they're engaging in the world, who I am in relationship to them, what does it mean for me to create, and them to understand me through what I create. In terms of locale, the woods.
Nice.
The mountains and the woods is where, if I could just stay there and magically make films and somehow, and mind you, I'm always making the Lord of the Rings in my head when I'm in the woods. I just happen to be in it, so.
Last question. What do you think is the most important skill for a storyteller to develop?
Empathy. You have to be able to put yourself in the position of each of the characters, even the bad ones. Because how do you tell the story, the conflict, the arc if you don't know, or you can't put yourself in the position of each of those characters so you can see why they're justifying the actions that they're taking. Empathy, as I think, is the one skill set that you have to hone in, so you don't have these plastic surface characters that only do very surface level things without any other motivation.
Amazing. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I was on what's the studio with
Inside the actor's studio.
It is inside the actor's studio. This was inside the director's studio.
I'll take it.
That's what I felt like. I
appreciate it.
So it was good, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.